Hi, I'm Kevin McAfee, and welcome to Facets of the Stone. And we're here with Jeanne Nigro Ministries, and Jeannie's with us to give us more teachings on the Jewish roots of our faith. Are you excited
I'm
about
ready.
this?
Let's go.
I am too. Well, as you know, we have been really into the biblical feast and really trying to kind of get our arms around what it means to celebrate these amazing feasts of the Bible. Why did you want to teach these kind of teachings? What was it that caused you to say, you know, I think we need to know about this?
Because, Kevin, I feel that the biblical feasts are something that when we observe them, when we learn about them, when we study the biblical feasts, that you will grow in intimacy with the Lord. You will grow in intimacy with Him through what they tell you about who He is and how He sees you. You will grow with a better understanding of who Jesus is. It strengthens your faith in Jesus. And it prepares you for the future, because we're going to be celebrating the feast with Him in the millennium. And so it gives us ready, prepares us for our bridegroom. You know, we've got a bridegroom who's coming for us. And just as if you were getting married next week, wouldn't you want to know everything that you could know about your future spouse and who you're going to be living with, and what's it going to be like, and what's he going to be doing, and what we'll be doing with him? So it answers all those questions, and it strengthens your faith and really gives you an anchor of hope for the future in these uncertain times, an anchor of hope for the future, as well as strength for today and healing for today, and the ability to apply everything we learn about the feast to our moment-by-moment, day-to-day lives. They're just incredible.
Well, it's exciting to think about, and what we're going to be talking about today is first fruits.
Yes.
Now, you know, we've talked about what first fruits mean, and I think there's a lot of people that have different conceptions of what does it mean to celebrate the Feast of First Fruits. So let's kind of start at the beginning, and you help us understand this concept.
How do we celebrate first
How do we do
fruits?
this?
Yeah. Well, first, let's talk about what was the celebration of first fruits. And like all the Levitical feasts or the biblical feasts, they come from the book of Leviticus. They were designed by God, not by the Jewish people. They were designed by God. They're the Lord's feast from Leviticus 23. So we get all of our instruction from the Bible, from Leviticus originally, for the feast. And we talk about Passover being the feast when Jesus fulfilled it at the cross, at his crucifixion. He fulfilled Passover. He was the Passover lamb. And 3 days later, they were commanded to celebrate the Feast of First Fruits. So what happened 3 days after Jesus' crucifixion?
He arose.
He rose. So he fulfilled the Feast of First Fruits with the resurrection. And the scriptures that we now know from Paul, say in 1 Corinthians 15, that talk about Messiah, Yeshua, or Jesus being our first fruits, when you understand that first fruits meant the Feast of First Fruits, it just opens up a whole new depth of understanding of who Jesus was. It wasn't just flowery language that sounded good that Paul was writing about. It was very specific. Jesus fulfilled the Feast of First Fruits. He was the first to rise from the grave. He was the first to rise from the dead. And in the Feast of First Fruits, Kevin, traditionally, all of the feasts originally were more geared toward the agriculture. There were celebrations many times of a harvest. And the first fruits was a celebration of the first early harvest, which was barley. So the tradition was celebrate in the temple, and the priests and the people would bring their first fruits of barley to the temple. The priests would wave it in the air and in all directions, symbolizing that God was sovereign over all the earth. And they had the appreciation that we miss sometimes, that everything they have came from God. So to give him back first fruits was really, I mean, it all belonged to him anyway.
You know what's exciting is I think about, as Jeannie, as you're talking about this whole experience of this resurrection. Rich Peluso from Sony Pictures was at our house the other day from Sony Affirm, and they did this movie called Risen.
Right.
And the whole movie was based upon this resurrection, this hope that here Jesus was gone and he didn't rise from the dead. And then there's the largest manhunt in history. And during that time, he appears to them. And it seems like that Jesus himself actually gave such a amazing blessing to these disciples that had followed him. And I was thinking, as you were talking about how the first fruits feast represents hope, That is exactly what this is. It's about hope.
Exactly. And you know what I always think of, Kevin, is that when these things happened, when Jesus fulfilled these feasts, his followers at the time, they celebrated the feast then. So they had such depth of understanding of what was happening, what Jesus was communicating to them about how he was the Messiah. So when he rose on that day, not any day, I mean, just rising is a miracle enough, but that he rose on the Feast of First Fruits, to them, and to us it should, but to them it communicated that he was the Messiah, obviously, but then that it gave them hope that they would rise, because Jesus is the first fruits, just as the barley was the first fruit of the harvest, gave them hope that the rest of the harvest would come in. Well, when Jesus rose, that gave his followers hope that they would also rise. And I believe, Kevin, that gave them courage. Because don't you ever wonder, how do they have so much courage to stand strong in all that persecution that they faced, and to go to they all went to their death for Jesus, for Yeshua. And I believe that part of it was because of when he would fulfill these feasts, it gave them such courage and strength, because they knew without a shadow of a doubt that just as he's the first fruit of the resurrection, that the rest of the harvest, or they would also rise with him, and we will rise with him as well. And that should give you hope that you, in Yeshua, with your faith in Jesus, will rise with him.
Well, one of the things that we're going to be doing is talking more about the biblical feast, and having Jeanne continue to share with us about some of the symbolism, the teaching, and truly some of the life lessons. But before we go, remember this. She has created a series called Biblical Feasts, and I want you to watch this very special message you're about to see, where it shares how you can be involved in the biblical feast in a very real and a very practical way. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Most of us agree that there's so much about the Bible we don't know or even completely understand. Stories and people from a long time ago that document who God is, each providing a roadmap of how we are to live and who we are to God. Throughout the Bible, there are stories of feasts. Many are still observed today, especially within the Jewish culture. But very few of us know much about the feasts, and even less about the significance of what the feasts say about who God is.
Studying our Jewish roots in the biblical feast is so important, and Jeanne Nigro has created a CD series we believe can impact your life. You see, it helps us understand the facets of God's heart.
Author and teacher Jeanne Nigro travels the world teaching about the biblical feasts, the extraordinary way God reveals himself to us through the feasts, and the difference those truths can have in our lives.
Maybe you've been asking yourself this question: how could my family become more involved in the biblical feast? How could we learn and teach our children even more about these special traditions that were not created by the Jewish people, but by God? You see, it was his plan to design these biblical feasts so that you could be a part. This entire series is designed just for you, for your church, for your group, your small group. It's a time when you can come together and really learn the facets of God's heart. We're so excited about the biblical feast. Today, make the decision that you're going to be involved as well.
Understanding the biblical feasts is one way to know God in a deeper and richer way. To learn more about this fascinating teaching, get the full CD series, The Biblical Feasts, at JeanneNigro.com. This is a teaching you'll want to have and share with others. The Biblical Feasts by Jeanne Nigro, available at JeanneNigro.com.
Welcome back to Facets of the Stone with Jeanne Nigro. And Jeanne, this is an exciting, really moment when we think about the resurrection and talking about the biblical feast, the first fruits.
Yes.
Now, how do we celebrate the first fruits? What do we do to help us prepare to celebrate this feast?
Well, I think we can celebrate the Feast of First Fruits, Kevin, by when we celebrate Passover. We know that 3 days after Passover is the Feast of First Fruits. Mm-hmm. And we can celebrate in many ways. One is just being thankful, taking the day to be thankful to God for what he's given you. And we need to realize that everything that we have, everything that you have, is from God. And so what could we give back to him? It's all his anyway. You know, sometimes we think that it's our own strength that we achieve things, but it's only because of the gifts and abilities that he's given us. And so everything that we accomplish is because of him, and really should be for him, to glorify him.
And one of the things, you know, when I hear the word first fruits, I remember growing up in a Baptist church, we would attach the first fruits of our labor to our tithe. You know, and I really believe so much in supporting the local church, and everything about Jeanne Nigro Ministries is about working in partnership with churches. So if you're not involved in a local church and in a local church ministry and giving to that church, get involved, because it'll change your life. But help me understand how first fruits might relate to that. I mean, I know I've been at House of David, and we brought first fruits as a tithe, as a gift to Yeshua to say thank you. Is that a process or part of that celebration?
Tithing is definitely a part of it, because it's all, every time that we recognize that everything comes from God, our finances, our abilities, our gifts, then we are tithing to him in a sense. We're tithing our finances, and I think it's important at First Fruits to to take a check. Are we tithing? Could we be giving more? And to almost reflect and think, what else could we be giving back to God in other ways that we could give back to God? And it doesn't have to be giving material things, but emotional things.
Yes.
Can I give over my bitterness? Can I forgive? That's the way of giving parts that we want to hold on to back to God, and recognize. One of my favorite verses is, you are 1 Corinthians 6:19-20, you are not your own, you are bought with a price. So glorify God with your body. And that convicts me many times, because I don't like forgiving. It's just something that's not built into my nature. And not to many of our natures, actually, but I think I'm not my own. I don't really have a choice. I want to connect with what God's heart is. That's what Facets of a Stone is all about, connecting with the facets of God's heart. Well, what are the facets? How does God feel and see the other people in my life? And that could be friends, my husband, my family, anyone that I encounter. We all have opportunities to be hurt, and because we all live with imperfect people, we are imperfect. So maybe I don't feel like forgiving, but what is God's heart toward that person? And I want to have intimacy with God, so it's not worth having anything separate me from him, and unforgiveness separates me from God. So a first fruit could be giving up that right to be angry, giving up that right to be hurt, and saying, I'm not my own. I was bought at a price, and so how could I give back to God what's already his?
I want to talk to you about this word resurrection, even the term restoration, because first fruits connotates hope, as you have taught us, and it seems that we all have this place, this part of our life that needs to be restored. And we battle against sometimes flesh and blood, sometimes principalities, and it just seems to get more and more difficult the older we get. How can we use this concept, but a real feast, and turn it into something beautiful in our lives?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, Kevin, because this year at the Feast of First Fruits, one of the things as I've been preparing and praying about first fruits, sometimes it's hard to say the word.
First fruits, say it 3 times.
It's a tongue twister. I said, Lord, what do you want to show me? Because every year, with all the feasts, I love the feast, I always pray, what is something new you want to show me with this feast? Because it's something that God just draws me into intimacy with him every year deeper. And this year, one of the things that he spoke to my heart about the first Feast of First Fruits was that God is in the business of bringing dead things to life. The Feast of First Fruits is all about, originally, Jesus resurrecting from the dead, bringing dead things to life, and that we will rise with him. But personally in your life, what is an area of your life that you feel is dead right now? Maybe you feel emotionally dead, or that your relationship with your spouse is dead, or with your children, or with your parents, or any relationship, where do you feel like there's no hope? It's dead, or you just feel dead or shut down or depressed. That God is in the business of bringing dead things to life. And I hope that encourages you today, because just as Yeshua rose from the dead, God wants to bring life into every situation where there's currently death. And he can. That's what his heart is. It's a facet of his heart, a facet of the stone.
You know, Jeannie, I'm so excited about how everyone at home can really be impacted by this teaching. One of the most important things that Jeanne Nigro Ministries did was they created a CD series entitled The Biblical Feast. This CD series can be yours today. All you have to do is go to JeanneNigro.com, and if you'll go there, there's some places you can click on and learn about the CD series, The Biblical Feast, and you will be able to see and understand the real heart and the spirit of each one of these feasts that are taught about in Leviticus. This is so important that I wanted to take these few moments to tell you, and this next special message that's going to be coming for you will give you the details on how you can be involved in these biblical feasts. I'm excited that Facets of the Stone has taken this strong position to have these teachings shared with you. So just watch. We'll be back in just a minute.
Most of us agree that there's so much about the Bible we don't know or even completely understand. Stories and people from a long time ago that document who God is, each providing a roadmap of how we are to live and who we are to God. Throughout the Bible, there are stories of feasts. Many are still observed today, especially within the Jewish culture. But very few of us know much about the feasts, and even less about the significance of what the feasts say about who God is.
Studying our Jewish roots in the biblical feast is so important, and Jeanne Nigro has created a CD series we believe can impact your life. You see, it helps us understand the facets of God's heart.
Author and teacher Jeanne Nigro travels the world teaching about the biblical feasts, the extraordinary way God reveals himself to us through the feasts, and the difference those truths can have in our lives.
Maybe you've been asking yourself this question: how could my family become more involved in the biblical feast? How could we learn and teach our children even more about these special traditions that were not created by the Jewish people but by God? You see, it was His plan to design these biblical feasts so that you could be a part. This entire series is designed just for you, for your church, for your group, your small group. It's a time when you can come together and really learn the facets of God's heart. We're so excited about the biblical feast. Today, make the decision that you're going to be involved as well.
Understanding the biblical feasts is one way to know God in a deeper and richer way. To learn more about this fascinating teaching, get the full CD series, The Biblical Feasts, at JeanneNigro.com. This is a teaching you'll want to have and share with others. The Biblical Feasts by Jeanne Nigro, available at JeanneNigro.com.
Hi, I'm Kevin McAfee, and welcome back to Facets of the Stone. You know, we've been talking about the first feast. We've been talking about giving ourselves an opportunity to share thankfulness, to have a Thanksgiving. Let's say that we're in a home and we have our family around, and we decide, let's have a first feast celebration. What would you recommend that we do to make that happen?
Well, for a celebration of the Feast of First Fruits, Kevin, I would suggest some time to maybe go around the table and talk about, almost like a Thanksgiving, you know, mini Thanksgiving. Yes. What are you thankful for? What are you thankful for in your life that God has done or that God has given you? And it's an opportunity to kind of bring that first fruit, to recognize that everything that you have and everything that you've been given is from God. Everything, all good and perfect gifts come from Him.
So is every Thanksgiving, could you make every Thanksgiving part of your first fruits if you wanted to?
Yes, when you think about Thanksgiving, originally for us was thanking God for the harvest. And that's what the Feast of First Fruits was. Originally in Leviticus was an opportunity to thank God for the harvest. The first fruit was the barley. And it gave them hope and a guarantee that the rest of the harvest would come in. And so just as Jesus rose from the dead, it gives us that hope and guarantee that we will rise from the dead also. And that hope and guarantee in our moment-by-moment lives that he can bring life into any dead situation, even dead emotions, and even dead thoughts and spirit that feels dead within us, can be brought to life. And even if you feel like you don't have any intimacy with God or any connection with him at all, that he can bring life and he can bring connection and relationship between you and him.
Let's talk about, as we talk about restoration and resurrection, a lot of people are having family troubles. There's a lot of divorce.
Yes.
There's a lot of brokenness that people are having to go through. There's a lot of singles that are out there that are young singles that maybe they have children and they're having difficulties and they're trying to find restoration, they're trying to find hope. What message would you share with them about this feast that might be a blessing to them?
Well, I would share with all of you, and we all are experiencing pain in some ways, because we live in a fallen world. We live in a world where there's sin, where there's hurt, where people have strongholds. And when I talk about strongholds, I just mean, the lies that we believe about ourselves and about God and those wounds in our heart. We all have them. And so we're all interacting with each other through our strongholds. And so I would just encourage you that, again, that just as Jesus rose from the dead, which is a miracle, that God is in the business of bringing death to life, of bringing dead things to life. And so I would encourage you, one, with that hope, but then encourage you to start recognizing that when you hold on to, let's just say, emotions that bring death, fear, stress, unforgiveness, self-condemnation, bitterness, resentment, shame, all of those things, being critical of yourself and others, they bring death. So if God is in the business of bringing dead things to life, you don't have to hold on to those anymore. And you don't need to be bringing that death into your life, into your body. So you can confess that to him as sin. And you can cancel the authority that we give the enemy by holding on to those things. And we can ask God, what lies am I believing? And I encourage you today, ask God, what lie am I believing about you, God? What lie am I believing about myself? Because behind fear and stress even stress, it sounds socially acceptable, but it's still sin. There's always a lie that we're believing about ourselves or about God. So that's a very practical way that we can celebrate the feast that brings dead things to life, Kevin, is by starting there. And he's so faithful. If you ask God to show you the lies you're believing, he will show you, because he desires to bring truth to your innermost parts. So he will show you what lies you're believing. And then the father of lies is the enemy. So when you hold on to lies, that sin, you confess those lies and you command. Satan doesn't have any authority unless you give it to him. Cancel the authority you've given him through believing those lies. And that's a way of breaking free from those chains of death and experiencing life. But we don't experience life when we choose to hold on to death. So we have to let go of it first, confess it, cancel the authority we've given the enemy through holding on to it, and then we can experience God's life.
I've heard this teaching many times about, let go and let God. One of my chronic sins is when I want to hold on to whatever it is that possesses me. And I try to let go, and then as soon as I let go, I grab it back again. Because what am I needing? It's like mine. It's like I take this, and then I let it go, then I grab it back again.
It sounds like there's fear behind it.
And it is. There is fear behind that, and that's part of that stronghold. But if you keep working, it's like you say, if you keep working and you keep seeing, you keep pursuing, you keep studying, at a certain point in time, it's not as hard anymore. It begins to do it. And obedience sometimes isn't, I feel like being obedient.
Right.
I feel like if I do this, it's going to be well. It's like, I'm going to give this over, and it's just like we, sink back and we sit back, and finally when we let go, God does something amazing.
Like I said, Kevin, I never wake up in the morning feeling like forgiving someone. That's not my nature. But yet, that's something that comes easy.
Right.
And sometimes we think, well, we'll forgive when the other person deserves it. Well, they never deserve it. We didn't deserve to be forgiven by Yeshua, by God. Mm-hmm. And so if we wait till someone deserves it, we will never forgive them.
It's not going to happen that way. You're exactly right. I think it's going to be something that helps us even more. One thing that I have appreciated about Facets of the Stone and about Jeanne Nigro Ministries is the commitment that Jeanne Nigro has made to the biblical feast. Each week for this first season, being together with you, we're going to be talking about the very specific feasts, all of the feasts of the Lord. We're going to be looking at it every single week and discussing it and trying to see how it applies in our hearts and our lives and why we need to even know about these feasts. All these things are coming together at the exact time in your life to help you learn more about Yeshua, so that upon his return, just as Jeanne teaches, we'll be even more prepared. So thank you for joining us and being with us. Go to JeanneNigro.com. That's our ministry page. You'll learn everything about who we are, what we're doing, and where we're going. And I just want to say this. Remember, God loves you, and he can make a difference in your life. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
If you've enjoyed today's show, Facets of the Stone, we encourage you to find out more about the ministry work of Jeanne Nigro at JeanneNigro.com. There you'll learn more about the teachings from today's show, as well as other insightful topics. The biblical feasts, breaking free, and many more. Jeanne Nigro's teachings are available on CD, as well as her new book, Unshaken. Jeanne's newly published Unshaken is a book for your life today. A book to help you navigate the storms of life. A book to help you better understand who God is and who you are to Him. It is possible to live this life during these trying days and be unshaken. Also, check out when Jeanne will be teaching in a city near you. For more information or to help support the work of Jeanne Nigro Ministries, visit us at JeanneNigro.com. Teachings that impact your life. Teachings that help you grow deeper in your relationship with God. JeanneNigro.com.